Hi everyone, the topic of our project is police overtime. The target of our project is to conduct a thorough analysis of the Boston Police Department budget. And the project will involve data cleaning, analyzing, and visualizing the overtime data to answer the key questions regarding the shifts in budget, patterns in overtime pay, and the potential inequities with the department. And up to now, we have made some progress. We have completed the initial data preprocessing and the statistical analysis. We have performed the data visualization and observed preliminary findings. We have conducted a preliminary analysis of the fundamental questions. And about the data collection, we primarily use the 3 government open datasets, which cover the employee earnings, the city budget, and employee overtime work. There are 7 basic questions and I will talk about them separately. So the first question is, how has the BPD budget changed year over year? And where have the funds grown or shrunk overall and intra-departmentally? How has the funding shifted between departments? We first examined the annual changes in the BPD budget. We utilized the data from the city of Boston spanning 2022 to 2025. The total budget is divided into 7 categories. We calculated the percentage of the total budget allocated to each category. From the charts, we can see that the personnel services consistently accounted for the largest share of the total budget. By 2025, the overall budget showed a continued increasing trend compared to previous years. And this trend suggests the potential overspending in staffing costs and operational management expenses. After analyzing the top 10 highest earning police department occupations from 2020 to 2024, we can find that the policy officer consistently holds the top spot in the total income. This is unsurprising given the large proportion of officers in this role. Lastly, we then looked at the changes in funding between departments. To do this, we looked at the earning data from 2012 to 2022. From this, we can see which department received the highest salaries and therefore the most budget for that category. So as the image shows, the police department has consistently been the highest earning department between 2020 to 2024. And we will talk about it in the next slide. So the second question is, how have the BPD paychecks changed year over year? To analyze how the paychecks changed year over year, we used the employee earnings report dataset and focused on the total gross pay for police department employees. We visualized the year-over-year changes in average pay for both BPD and non-BPD employees using a line chart. The results showed that the paycheck of both BPD and non-BPD employees have been increasing from 2014 to 2024. The BPD paychecks have consistently been significantly higher than those of the other city employees for around $60,000. Especially with a notable increase in 2024. And this suggests either an increase in base pay, overtime, or additional compensation categories such as the injury or education incentives, which may warrant the further investigation. And the third question is, given the previous overtime data, predict the amount of overtime paid for the next year, and how does this compare with the budget allocation for BPD? So the results are achieved by a simple linear model regardless of the department. Current model can only predict the trait due to a poor R-squared score. As a result, we predict that the total overtime payment will continue to increase for the coming years. And in future, we plan to enhance the model by split the different department and change to a more complex model. So the fourth question is, how much BPD officer pay came from the injury pay, and what percentage of officers took injury pay in a given year. And the left chart illustrates the percentage of the total gross pay that came from the injury compensation for BPD officers from 2014 to 2024. In 2024, injury pay accounted for the lowest share of officer income for about 9%. A significant increase followed by 25 2015, and from 2015 to 2021, the percentage rose steadily year over year, indicating a growing reliance on injury-related compensation. In 2022, there was a notable jump, marking the peak of this trend. 2023 saw a slight decline, and in 2024, the percentage dropped sharply. The right chart shows the percentage of the BPD officers who received injury pay each year. We can observe that the percentage was notably high in both 2014 and 2024. And this is kind of unexpected because, especially when compared to the previous chart showing the injury pay ratio, where 2014 and 2024 had some of the lowest ratios. And this suggests that while more officers may have received injury pay in those years, the individual amounts were relatively small, or their total compensation was much higher overall, causing the ratio to appear lower. The fifth question is, are certain officers more likely to have lower work-to-paid ratios? This analysis focused specifically on the relationship between rank and work-to-paid overtime ratios. This data suggests a clear trend. Higher ranking officers tend to have lower work-to-paid overtime ratios. In other words, they are typically paid for significantly more overtime hours than they report working. Since we lack the certain demographic and employment details for some officers, such as the race, age, and tenure, the analysis focuses specifically on the relationship between rank and work-to-paid overtime ratios. The sixth question is, what is the distribution of ratios of overtime worked versus overtime paid? Are there any outliers? So the distribution of the ratios of overtime paid hours to court worked hours is right skewed, with a large number of observations clustered at lower ratios. And for the question, are there any outliers? We draw the worked to paid ratio in 2014 to 2020, and we can find the drop between 2018 and 2020 is specifically sharp. Since the drop in 2020 is significantly larger than the gradual changes observed in previous years, we draw the box plot of the 2020 data and set the threshold to 0.1, as we believe extremely low ratio values may be skewing the mean distribution in 2020, and the outliers are shown in the bottom right picture, which are lower than 0.1. To conclude, we still have some challenges. The first challenge is that the task to analyze the discrimination in the overtime has been postponed due to the lack of data in gender, race, etc. And the second one is some of the time data in the overtime table is inconsistent in format, so we need to clean the dataset. And in the dataset of paycheck, it is difficult to separate the outliers because those of the extreme high growth may not be the real outliers. However, they can still affect the average value a lot. So here's what we are going to do in the future. The first is to evaluate changes in the BPD budget year over year and identifying the trends in funding. And also we want to find how the BPD paycheck trend relates to the political changes. And in terms of outliers, we want to identify an appropriate method to filter out the salary outliers and obtain a more reasonable average.